It was a quiet morning in Pallet Town, the kind of morning where the sun rises slowly, stretching its golden light over the peaceful little houses, while a gentle breeze carries the scent of fresh grass through the air. The trees whispered softly, their leaves rustling in a calm rhythm, as if even nature itself knew that today, something special was about to begin. Inside a small room, cluttered with posters of Pokémon battles and dreams yet to come true, a boy named Ash Ketchum was sleeping. Well, not sleeping in the peaceful sense. He was tossing and turning, mumbling words like Pokeball and I choose you in his sleep, as if his dreams were already running ahead into the adventures waiting for him. Today was the day Ash had been waiting for. His journey as a Pokémon trainer was about to begin. But fate, as it often does, had a slightly different plan. When Ash finally woke up, much later than he had intended, he sprang out of bed in a frenzy. His hair was a wild mess, sticking out in every direction, and his pajamas still clung to him as he scrambled to find his backpack. He had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining himself receiving his first Pokémon, standing proudly as a new trainer. But reality had a funny way of making things chaotic. In his rush, Ash bolted out of his house, barely noticing his mother's cheerful "good luck" echoing from the kitchen. He dashed through Pallet Town's cobbled paths, his heart pounding, feet barely touching the ground as he hurried toward Professor Oak's lab. But as he skidded to a stop at the lab's entrance, the worst news greeted him. The 3 Pokémon he had long dreamed of choosing, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, had already been given to trainers who had arrived on time. Ash's heart sank. He felt like the last guest to a party where all the cake had already been eaten. Yet, in that moment of disappointment, Professor Oak offered a peculiar smile, a smile that hinted at a surprise. "There is one more Pokémon," Oak said, leading Ash to a lonely Pokeball resting on a separate table. But this Pokeball wasn't like the others. It had been modified with a small lightning symbol on its casing, as if warning its future trainer of what was inside. As Ash eagerly took the Pokeball, it burst open with a crackle of electricity, and there, standing on the lab floor, was a small yellow Pokémon, with bright, curious eyes and the tiniest of smirks. Pikachu. Pikachu's tail flicked impatiently as it sized up the boy in front of it. It wasn't impressed, and it wasn't interested in being caught in a Pokeball either. The moment Ash tried to return Pikachu into its Pokeball, the little electric type sapped him with a small jolt of electricity, enough to make his hair puff up like a fuzzy mareep. Ouch? Okay, so you don't like Pokeballs? Got it, Ash said with a sheepish grin, brushing off his singed hair. Professor Oak chuckled from the sidelines. Pikachu has a strong personality. You'll need to figure out how to work together. And so Ash's journey didn't begin with a smooth, heroic start. It began with stubborn stares, tiny electric shocks, and an unspoken challenge between a boy and his first Pokémon. But sometimes, bonds that take longer to form are the ones that last the longest. As Ash left the lab with Pikachu trotting beside him, though at a safe distance, they took their first steps out of Pallet Town. The road ahead was long, winding through grassy fields, small creeks, and shaded trails. But in that moment, all Ash could think about was how to get Pikachu to like him. "Hey, Pikachu, we're gonna be the best of friends. You'll see," Ash said, his tone hopeful, but met with a dismissive flick of Pikachu's tail. The sun was now higher in the sky, casting soft beams of light through the leaves, making patterns dance on the ground as they walked. Birds chirped gently in the distance, and the soft crunch of gravel under Ash's shoes mixed with Pikachu's faint pattering steps. The world was alive, but not loud. Everything felt calm, as if nature itself was giving them space to figure each other out. Ash remembered what his mom had said before he ran out. Be patient. Sometimes friends take time. He smiled at the thought, watching Pikachu wander a few feet ahead, sniffing at wildflowers, ears perked up cautiously. They passed a small hill where a family of butterfree fluttered gently above a patch of blooming flowers. Pikachu paused, watching them curiously, and Ash noticed how, for a brief moment, Pikachu's stubborn expression softened. There was something calming about seeing Pokémon in their natural state, free and peaceful. And Ash realized, maybe Pikachu didn't dislike him. Maybe Pikachu just wasn't used to humans yet. I guess we're both learning today, huh? Ash whispered softly, sitting down on a nearby rock, giving Pikachu space to explore without pressure. Minutes passed. The sun warmed their skin. A gentle breeze rolled through, and Ash found himself just breathing. For the first time that morning, he wasn't rushing. He wasn't thinking about catching Pokémon or becoming a master. He was just there. And as if sensing the change in Ash's energy, Pikachu trotted back, sitting beside him, its tiny cheeks still sparking faintly, but less aggressively now. They sat in silence together, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. No words, no commands, just understanding. And in that quiet, Pikachu's tiny paw reached out, gently tapping Ash's arm. It was a small gesture, but to Ash, it felt like the beginning of something bigger. The soft afternoon light was mellowing into a gentle golden hue, casting a warm glow over the path as Ash and Pikachu continued their slow walk beyond Pallet Town. The earlier tension between them had loosened, not completely gone, but softened, like a knot beginning to untangle. Ash noticed how Pikachu would occasionally glance back at him, not with defiance this time, but with a flicker of curiosity. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, filled with the soft rustling of the grass and the rhythmic crunching of their footsteps on the dirt path. As they approached a small wooden bridge that crossed over a shallow stream, Ash slowed his pace. He looked down at the clear water, watching as it shimmered under the sunlight, the tiny ripples flowing smoothly, without hurry. The world seemed to move slower here, calmly, like a lullaby being sung by nature itself. Ash sat down on the edge of the bridge, letting his legs dangle just above the water. He patted the wooden plank beside him, inviting Pikachu without words. For a moment, Pikachu stood still, as if deciding whether to accept this simple gesture. Then, with a soft hop, Pikachu joined him, sitting close, but not too close. I'm not going to force you into anything, buddy, Ash said quietly, his voice softer than before. But I'm not giving up on you either. Pikachu's ears twitched at Ash's words, but it didn't move away. Instead, it watched as a small group of Poliwag floated lazily down the stream, their tails swishing in harmony with the water's flow. It was the kind of sight that didn't need words. Just watching was enough. Ash smiled, feeling the calm seep into him. He realized that maybe the way to connect with Pikachu wasn't through battles or commands, but through quiet moments like this, simple, shared silences where trust could grow naturally. Suddenly, a soft gust of wind rustled through the trees, scattering a few dandelion seeds into the air. They floated gently, swirling like tiny stars, drifting down toward Pikachu. One of the seeds landed softly on Pikachu's nose, making the little Pokémon go cross-eyed for a second as it tried to figure out what had just happened. Ash chuckled, a genuine light-hearted laugh, and Pikachu, unable to resist the silliness of it all, gave a tiny sneeze that sent the seed back into the air. It was such a small, innocent moment, but sometimes that's all it takes to build a bridge. Ash reached into his backpack and pulled out a small piece of bread his mom had packed for him. He tore off a piece and gently placed it on the wooden plank between them, not offering it directly to Pikachu, but just letting it be there, a quiet offering of peace. Pikachu eyed the bread cautiously, then slowly, inch by inch, crept forward to nibble at it. Ash pretended not to notice, turning his gaze back to the stream, giving Pikachu the space it seemed to appreciate. Minutes passed. The bread was gone, but something else remained, a thread, however thin, of mutual understanding. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky now, the colors shifting from bright gold to soft amber. The path ahead would soon be bathed in twilight, and Ash knew they should get moving. But he didn't rush. He stood up slowly, stretching his arms with a big yawn, the kind of yawn that wasn't from tiredness, but from being too comfortable. "All right, Pikachu, let's keep going," he said gently. This time, Pikachu didn't hesitate. It trotted along beside him, not too far ahead, not too far behind. The gap was smaller now. As they continued their journey, the peaceful quiet was interrupted only by the occasional rustle of a pigeon taking flight, or the soft rustling of bushes as tiny Pokémon scurried out of sight. The road felt less lonely now. Even if they weren't talking, they were walking together. Up ahead, a field of tall grass swayed like an ocean of green waves, glistening under the setting sun. Ash remembered Professor Oak's words of caution about wild Pokémon hiding in the tall grass. He looked down at Pikachu, wondering if they were ready. But then, as if sensing his thoughts, Pikachu's cheeks sparked just a little. Not in annoyance this time, but in readiness. Ash smiled, not with overconfidence, but with quiet assurance. "Let's take it slow, Pikachu. No need to rush." They stepped into the tall grass carefully. The blades brushed softly against Ash's legs and Pikachu's fur. Every sound was magnified in this small world. The rustle of leaves, the distant hum of cricketot, even the soft sound of their breathing. And then, a Rattata darted across their path, squeaking in surprise at the sudden encounter. Ash instinctively reached for a pokeball, but before he could throw it, Pikachu stepped forward. Not to attack, not to scare the Rattata, but to simply observe. The Rattata paused, as if confused by this unusual trainer-Pokémon duo that wasn't acting aggressively. After a tense few seconds, the Rattata scurried away into the grass, and Pikachu turned back to Ash, tilting its head slightly. Ash laughed softly. "Guess we're not battling today, huh?" Pikachu's tail swished, almost like a playful shrug. It wasn't about catching Pokémon today. It was about understanding, about patience. As they emerged from the tall grass, the sky was painted in hues of pink and lavender. The day had been chaotic, unexpected, and far from the perfect start Ash had imagined. But as he glanced at Pikachu walking calmly beside him, he realized maybe it was better this way. Maybe this was exactly how their story was meant to begin. As the last light of day melted behind the trees, Ash and Pikachu came upon a quiet clearing at the edge of a gentle slope. There were no sounds of passing trainers, no signs of wild Pokémon nearby, just a cool breeze rustling the tall grass and the occasional chirp of a distant hoot-hoot beginning its nightly call. Ash stopped and took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh scent of the open air. It smelled of wildflowers, pine, and the kind of peaceful silence that only comes when the world is preparing to sleep. "This looks like a good place to camp," he said softly. Pikachu circled the area a few times before settling down on a soft patch of moss beneath a small tree. It curled its tail near its body and looked up at Ash, not distrustfully, but not fully comfortable yet either, just watching, waiting. Ash reached into his bag and pulled out a small blanket, a flashlight, and a sandwich that had slightly squished during the day. He smiled to himself. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. He spread the blanket on the ground and sat down with a sigh, the tension from the day finally sinking into the earth beneath him. He took a few small bites of his sandwich and then, without a word, tore off a chunk and placed it near Pikachu. This time, Pikachu didn't hesitate. It walked over, gave the bread a quick sniff, and nibbled at it slowly, eyes half-lidded. Not from caution, but from tiredness. The long day had taken a toll on both of them. Ash leaned back on his elbows, gazing up at the sky. It had transformed into a tapestry of stars, scattered like glitter over a dark velvet canvas. The moon, soft and full, hung like a glowing lantern, watching over them. He could hear the gentle flow of a stream somewhere nearby, its sound blending with the faint rustle of leaves and Pikachu's quiet chewing. "You know," Ash began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I used to look out my window at night and wonder what it would be like to travel with a Pokémon. I thought it'd be all battles and badges, but today's been nothing like I expected." Pikachu didn't respond, of course, but it didn't walk away either. It just stayed close, ears twitching every now and then, tail flicking gently as it settled in. "I think," Ash continued, stretching out on the blanket, "I might like this better than I imagined, even with the shocks." He smiled to himself, remembering how many times Pikachu had zapped him just today. He touched his still frizzy hair and laughed quietly. Pikachu glanced at him, and then, in a quiet, surprising moment, hopped onto the edge of the blanket. Not beside Ash, just near him, close enough to be felt, but far enough to keep its independence. The small gesture didn't go unnoticed. Ash didn't say anything. He just smiled, turned on his side, and rested his head on his bag, like a makeshift pillow. The grass was cool beneath the blanket, and the night wrapped around them like a sleepy whisper. Above them, a shooting star sliced across the sky, trailing a soft white streak that faded slowly into the darkness. Ash blinked slowly, his eyelids growing heavy. "We'll get to Viridian City tomorrow," he murmured, not knowing if Pikachu was listening. "But tonight, this is enough." The night deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a noctowl hooted. A gentle wind danced through the trees. The stars pulsed faintly, above like tiny lullabies in the sky. And slowly Ash drifted off, breathing soft and steady. a faint smile still resting on his face. Pikachu, now lying quietly at the foot of the blanket, turned to look at the boy sleeping beside him. For a moment, its eyes lingered. Maybe this human wasn't so bad. Maybe this could work. Pikachu let out a quiet breath, curling its tail closer to its body. Its small eyes slowly closed as it listened to the sounds of the night, the soft rhythm of Ash's breathing, and the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. For the first time since leaving the lab, Pikachu allowed itself to sleep in peace. Not in a ball, not in a cage, but under the open stars, beside someone who didn't try to command it, but simply shared space. And in that quiet clearing, under the watching moon, the very first thread of trust wove itself into something stronger. A partnership was forming, slowly, gently, not through force, not through battle, but through stillness, through warmth, through rest. The night had been calm. Cool air flowed gently over the field as the world slept, cloaked under a blanket of stars. But nature, wild and untamed, doesn't always stay peaceful. It started with a rumble, low and distant, like a growl from the belly of the sky. Ash stirred slightly in his sleep, eyebrows twitching at the sound. Pikachu's ears flicked, eyes half opening. Another rumble came, this time closer, louder. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, tugging at the edges of the blanket. Leaves rustled like whispers, turning to warning. Pikachu rose to its feet, nose twitching. It could feel the air shifting, heavier, charged. Somewhere deep in the clouds above, tension was building. Nature's electricity was rising, and Pikachu, more attuned to it than any human, could sense the storm long before it struck. Ash blinked awake as the first droplet landed on his cheek. Huh? And then it hit. A crack of thunder split the sky, sharp and angry. Rain came down in a sudden sheet, not a drizzle, but a downpour, as if the sky had burst open all at once. Ash shot upright. Whoa, Pikachu, let's get out of here. Grabbing his bag, he scooped up the blanket and stumbled toward the nearby trees for shelter. Pikachu dashed beside him, tail bouncing, eyes scanning the sky. Under the thick canopy, the rainfall dimmed slightly, but it couldn't muffle the booming thunder or the flash of lightning that split the clouds like jagged scars. Ash panted, holding his backpack over his head to shield himself. Didn't expect this, he said between breaths. Guess nature's not exactly giving us a warm welcome, huh? Pikachu said nothing, just stayed close enough now to brush against his ankle. Maybe from caution, maybe from something else. And then came the cry. High above, through the slashing rain and streaks of lightning, a shrill screech pierced the air. Ash looked up. What was that? Out of the dark sky, like angry dots, came a flock of birds, sparrows, at least a dozen of them, maybe more. And they weren't gliding peacefully. They were diving, fast, aggressive. Pikachu's fur stood on end. One sparrow swooped down, claws outstretched. Pikachu leapt aside just in time. Another came, then two more. It wasn't random. They were attacking, as if something had stirred their nest, triggered their fury. Ash threw up his arms to shield himself. Hey, stop it! What do you want? One sparrow clawed at his hat, nearly knocking it off. Pikachu sent a weak spark toward it, barely enough to scare it away. But the others weren't so easily deterred. Ash picked up Pikachu and bolted. Through the trees, over roots, across puddles forming rapidly on the forest floor. Branches scratched at his arms, and rain blurred his vision, but he didn't stop. Behind them, the Spearows chased relentlessly, wings slicing through the wind, screeching louder with every beat. "I don't know why they're doing this," Ash cried, clutching Pikachu tightly against his chest. "But I'm not letting them hurt you." That was the moment. The second the words left his mouth, something shifted in Pikachu's eyes. Between the jolts of terror and the crackling sky, there was something else. Recognition. This human was protecting it. Not commanding, not forcing, just shielding it. No one had done that before. The Spearow dove again, claws raking Ash's back as he ran. He stumbled forward, dropping to his knees in a shallow creek. Mud splashed up his shirt. He winced, soaking wet, arms trembling. "I can't keep running," he muttered. The Spearow circled now, above, around, waiting for the right moment. Ash looked down at Pikachu, soaked and shivering. "You've got to get out of here. Run, I'll hold them off." Pikachu looked up at him, fur-drenched, cheeks flickering with faint sparks. And for the first time, Pikachu climbed up onto Ash's shoulder on its own. Ash froze. He didn't move, didn't speak. Pikachu stood there, tail swaying, eyes narrowed. It turned to face the sky. The sparks along its cheeks intensified. The storm above rumbled, as if responding to the energy building below. The Spearows saw it too. They dove together. Ash braced for impact. And then boom, a blinding flash. A burst of light so powerful it turned night into day for a split second. A bolt of electricity exploded from Pikachu's body, roaring like thunder itself. The shockwave surged through the air, rippling out with such force that the very rain seemed to pause. The Spearows were caught mid-flight, lifted, thrown, scattered. The forest lit up in electric gold. And when it dimmed, the flock was gone. Silent. Only the sound of rain remained. Ash blinked through the fading sparks, stunned. His arms still curled protectively, but he was untouched. Pikachu slumped gently from his shoulder into his lap, exhausted. Ash looked down at it, eyes wide with awe. You saved us." Pikachu let out a tired Pika before its eyes closed. Ash held it close, water dripping from his hair and clothes, but warmth blooming in his chest. He smiled, genuine and full of something new. Trust. And that's where their story truly began. Not in a lab or a battle, but in the rain, in fear, in sacrifice. Two souls, once strangers, bonded through lightning and loyalty. The road stretched on beneath their feet, dusty, uneven, and full of uncertainty. The sun dipped lower into the sky, casting long golden shadows over the quiet trail leading away from Pallet Town. Every step Ash took was still filled with determination, but the excitement from earlier had started to dim. Pikachu trailed behind, not in the pokeball where Ash wanted him to be, but walking at his own pace. His tiny yellow paws barely made a sound, but his expression was sharp, watchful, and slightly annoyed. That spark of electricity still lingered in the air around him like a warning. Ash peeked over his shoulder and tried a smile. "You know," he said softly, "we're gonna be great partners. I can feel it." Pikachu didn't respond. He just blinked slowly and turned his head to the side. There was still a gap between them, not just in steps, but in trust. And that gap would soon be tested. The trail narrowed as it twisted through a patch of thick grass and gnarled trees. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves in a way that felt uneasy. The warmth of the day gave way to a cooler breeze, and a low rumble of thunder echoed far off in the distance. Ash paused. He looked up at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming," he whispered, more to himself than to Pikachu. But Pikachu's ears twitched. His instincts told him the same thing. He stopped walking and sniffed the air. Static was building, but not from his own cheeks this time. Nature was stirring. Ash adjusted his backpack straps. "Let's hurry up. Maybe we can find shelter before it rains." They walked faster now, side by side, though still not quite together. Ash's eyes scanned ahead for a cave, a tree with thick branches, anything to protect them from the brewing storm. But the forest was unkind in this stretch. Tall, skeletal trees offered little cover. Then came a sound that made the wind itself pause. A loud, sharp cry, shrill, angry, and close. Ash spun around, startled. Pikachu's cheeks crackled defensively. From the skies they came, a swarm of Spearow, dozens of them, their eyes wild, wings slicing the air like blades. One dive-bombed suddenly, forcing Ash to duck. Another cry, closer this time. Pikachu jumped back with a growl. It had happened so fast. The peaceful trail now filled with chaos. The Spearow weren't just curious. They were attacking. Ash's heart pounded. "Pikachu, quick! Thundershock!" But Pikachu hesitated. The bond wasn't there yet. He didn't fully trust Ash, not enough to obey without question. The Spearow swooped lower. One grazed Pikachu's back with its talons. Ash didn't wait. He ran forward, arms outstretched. "Leave him alone." Another Spearow scratched his arm, tearing through his sleeve, but he didn't stop. He picked Pikachu up, careful but quick, and clutched him to his chest like a precious treasure. Pikachu tensed, shocked at the sudden closeness, but Ash didn't hesitate. "I got you," Ash breathed. "I won't let them hurt you." The rain began to fall, fat drops soaking through Ash's cap. Lightning flashed, and thunder cracked like the sky itself was splitting open. The world was a blur of motion and sound, but Ash kept running. Mud splashed up his legs. Branches tore at his clothes. Still, he ran. Behind him, the screeches of the Spearow chased them through the storm. The wind howled through the trees, and water poured from the sky in thick sheets, making it hard to see. But he didn't stop. Not even when the path turned to sludge beneath his shoes. Not even when he slipped, fell hard on one knee, and winced in pain. He cradled Pikachu, shielding him with his body. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the storm. Pikachu's eyes met his, and there was something there, something new. Ash was hurt, drenched, cold, but he wasn't thinking about himself. He had protected Pikachu without thinking twice. The Spearow weren't far behind. The screeches echoed closer and closer. Ash stood again, panting, and kept running. He spotted a distant silhouette, a towering tree with low branches, thick enough to hide under. With one final push, Ash stumbled towards it, collapsed at its base, and curled around Pikachu. The boy was shaking, soaked to the bone, breathing hard. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know we're not friends yet, but I'll protect you. I promise." Pikachu stared at him. The wind blew harder now, howling like an angry spirit. Another flash of lightning lit up Ash's face, bruised, scraped, but full of something rare. Courage. kindness, loyalty. Pikachu blinked slowly, and then for the first time, he moved closer on his own. He nestled into Ash's chest, resting his small head against the boy's heart. And that's when something changed. Pikachu nestled closer, his fur damp from the rain, but his body now warm from the closeness. For the first time, he wasn't pulling away. The spark between them, once literal and painful, had softened into something else, something real. Ash was still catching his breath. Every muscle in his legs ached. His shirt was clinging to his skin. But despite the discomfort, he smiled. Pikachu was with him now, not just physically, but truly with him. "You're brave," Ash whispered, resting his head back against the tree bark. "You didn't run, even when they attacked you." Pikachu didn't respond, but his tail flicked gently against Ash's arm, a small silent gesture of understanding. For a moment, everything quieted. The storm still raged around them, but beneath the tree's thick branches, it felt distant. Like the world had wrapped a protective barrier around them just for a while. Then a loud flutter broke the silence. The Spearow hadn't given up. Their glowing eyes cut through the rain like tiny red stars. They had circled back, angrier now, furious that their prey had slipped away. One of them screeched and dove straight toward the tree. Ash instinctively moved to shield Pikachu again, but he didn't have to. Pikachu leapt from Ash's arms with a spark flashing across his cheeks. His eyes narrowed, and his little body tensed with focus. He wasn't running anymore. He stood between Ash and the incoming Spearow, growling. Then Ash, still kneeling behind him, understood. The bond was no longer one-sided. "Pikachu," he whispered, his voice steady. "Use Thundershock." The words were the same, but the feeling behind them was different now. This wasn't an order. It was a request, a call between partners. And this time, Pikachu listened. A blinding burst of electricity exploded from his cheeks, lighting up the entire forest in a brilliant flash. The nearest Spearow was struck mid-air, wings flailing as it spun backward into the rain. The others paused, momentarily stunned. Ash shielded his eyes. The flash was dazzling, powerful, and crackled with energy that made the hairs on his arms stand up. Pikachu stood firm, panting lightly, sparks still dancing across his cheeks. The Spearow regrouped, circling again, but now they were hesitant, cautious. They had underestimated the small yellow Pokémon before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. But Pikachu wasn't afraid, and neither was Ash. Because now, they were fighting together. "Let's finish this," Ash shouted, a fire igniting in his voice. The Spearow swarmed again, coming in from all directions, screeching, flapping, attacking. But Pikachu was faster. He darted, dodged, and launched another thunderbolt into the thick of the swarm. Birds scattered in every direction, cries of surprise and fear echoing through the forest. Another flash, another strike. The remaining Spearow didn't wait for more. They turned mid-flight and vanished into the storm, retreating into the grey clouds like a vanishing nightmare. Silence returned. Only the sound of rain dripping from leaves remained. No cries, no flapping wings, no danger. Ash stepped out from the tree's shadow and looked around wide-eyed. "You did it," he breathed. "Pikachu, you really did it." He turned to his partner, his friend, and dropped to one knee. Pikachu was breathing hard, eyes still white from the battle, sparks finally fading from his fur. He looked at Ash, a little uncertain. Was it enough? Did Ash trust him now too? But Ash's grin answered that question before words ever could. He opened his arms. Come here. Pikachu hesitated for just a second, then bounded forward into Ash's embrace. Ash laughed, even through the sting of scrapes and bruises. I knew you had it in you. You're amazing. The storm began to ease, as if nature itself was nodding in approval. The thunder softened, fading into distant rumbles. The rain slowed to a light drizzle, and the first patch of clear sky peeked through the dark clouds. The forest was quiet once again, peaceful, cleansed. Ash and Pikachu sat together under the tree, not as strangers or reluctant travel partners, but as a team. Something unspoken had formed between them during the chaos. Trust, respect, a beginning. Ash leaned back and looked up at the clearing sky. That was close, he said, chuckling, but we made it. Pikachu yawned and curled up beside him. Ash reached out gently and scratched behind his ears. You saved us. You're incredible. Pikachu let out a small satisfied squeak and nestled deeper into the crook of Ash's side. And for the first time that day, they both rested, not out of exhaustion alone, but in comfort, in trust, and in the warmth of knowing that from here on out, they were no longer walking alone. The storm had passed, but something more important had taken place beneath that battered tree. Ash didn't move for a long time. He sat there quietly, letting the moment settle, like dew on the grass. His bruises still hurt. His clothes clung damply to his body, and Pikachu, curled tightly against his side, was clearly exhausted too. But none of that mattered anymore. They had faced fear, together. They had faced pain, together. And most importantly, they had chosen each other. When Ash finally stood, his limbs sore and heavy, Pikachu stirred beside him and stretched, his little paws brushing the grass. He looked up at Ash, not with suspicion like before, but with something gentler, something unspoken, but deeply understood. Ash bent down, holding out his arms. Ready to keep going? Pikachu didn't even hesitate. He scampered up into Ash's arms, climbed up to his shoulder, and perched there like he'd always belonged. And just like that, Ash smiled. A full, true smile. This wasn't the journey he had imagined when he left home that morning. It was better. As they walked toward the next town, the world felt different. The air was lighter. The sun peeked through the trees like it had missed them, and even the path ahead looked less intimidating. Ash wasn't walking alone. He had a partner now. One he hadn't expected, but one he already couldn't imagine life without. Hey, Pikachu, Ash said after a while, gently glancing up at his companion. You were amazing back there. You really showed them. Pikachu gave a small, proud squeak, his ears twitching as if to say, Of course I did. Ash laughed. You know, I was scared too. Pikachu looked at him, surprised. Ash scratched his head. Yeah, I was trying so hard to act brave, to protect you. But when all those Spearow came flying at us, I was terrified. He looked down at the path, voice softening. I thought I'd messed everything up. Pikachu tapped his head lightly with his tail. Ash looked up. You're saying I didn't mess up? Pikachu nodded, then nudged Ash's cheek with his nose. It was clumsy and small, but to Ash it meant more than any words ever could. Thanks, buddy, he whispered. and for a long stretch of the journey, they walked in silence. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with something stronger than noise, understanding. They stopped to rest near a stream. Ash knelt down, scooping water into his hands to splash his face. Pikachu leapt at the edge, tail flicking behind him. Then they both looked at their reflections in the water, muddy, scratched, tired, but smiling. Ash leaned back, lying in the grass, arms behind his head. So, what do you think the next town's going to be like? Pikachu flopped beside him, eyes squinting against the sun. Maybe we'll meet other trainers. Maybe even some gym leaders. Ash continued, daydreaming aloud. We're going to win badges, right? You and me? Become champions? Pikachu chirped in agreement, though his eyes were starting to droop. Ash reached over and patted his tiny paw. We'll do it together, no matter what. Then, from the nearby woods, a rustle. Ash sat up quickly. Did you hear that? Pikachu was already on his feet, ears perked. A shadow moved between the trees. Not big, but fast. Another wild Pokémon? Ash held still, watching carefully. His instincts told him not to panic, not anymore. Not after what they had just been through. The rustling stopped. Then, out hopped a small round Pokémon. A Caterpie. Ash blinked. Oh, just a little guy. Pikachu relaxed too, sitting beside Ash as the Caterpie wiggled curiously towards them. Ash smiled. Hey there, buddy. Not gonna hurt you. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a Pokédex, aiming it at the creature. Caterpie? The worm Pokémon. It releases a horrible stench from its antennae when threatened. Ash chuckled. Good thing he's not feeling threatened. He reached into his bag and tossed a small berry onto the ground. Caterpie sniffed it, then happily munched away. Ash leaned toward Pikachu. You know, maybe this is a sign. A peaceful sign. Pikachu gave him a side glance. You sure, after everything? Okay, Ash shrugged. Maybe not a sign, but still, it's nice. As the sun began to lower, casting a golden hue across the forest, Ash stood and stretched. Come on, partner. Let's find a place to camp. Pikachu hopped onto his shoulder again without needing to be asked. The trust between them now was natural, seamless, earned. And as they walked off into the fading daylight, even the Caterpie gave a small wave of its antenna. Ash waved back. See you around? Because from now on, Ash and Pikachu were not just surviving danger. They were walking forward with it behind them. Side by side, heart to heart. Night had settled across the land like a calm blanket, stars blinking gently in the navy sky above. A small fire crackled softly in a clearing, its orange glow casting dancing shadows across the trees. Ash sat cross-legged on the ground, a thin blanket draped over his shoulders. Pikachu was curled up beside him, tail flicking every so often in his sleep. They were both worn out, but safe, together. Ash watched the flames for a while, his mind replaying every moment from earlier. The lightning, the fear, the leap of faith. And that moment, when Pikachu, despite everything, chose to stand by him. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above. Ash spoke quietly, unsure if Pikachu was awake. You know, when I left Pallet Town this morning, I thought I had it all figured out. He gave a dry laugh, rubbing the back of his head. Get a Pokémon, win some battles, collect badges, become the best. Simple, right? Pikachu twitched in his sleep, but didn't wake. Ash's voice softened. But then I met you, and it's like everything changed. Not just the journey, me. He stared into the fire. I thought being a Pokémon trainer meant giving orders, proving strength. But maybe it's more about listening, trusting, protecting each other. Ash looked at Pikachu. You showed me that. Pikachu let out a soft, sleepy chirp, as if in reply. Ash smiled. Guess we both needed each other in a way. The fire crackled again. Somewhere in the distance, a noctowl hooted. Ash leaned back, lying flat in the grass, arms behind his head. Above him, the stars seemed to twinkle just a bit brighter than usual. He remembered what Professor Oak had said. The journey will teach you more than any textbook ever could. Ash hadn't understood that at the time. But now he did. And just then, as if the universe itself wanted to mark this moment, a single shooting star streaked across the sky. Ash's eyes widened. Whoa! He nudged Pikachu gently. Pikachu, wake up. Look. Pikachu stirred, blinking blearily, then looked up just in time to see the last tail of light fade away. Ash whispered, Make a wish. Pikachu tilted his head, curious. Ash closed his eyes. I wish that no matter how hard it gets, we never stop trusting each other. Pikachu nuzzled his cheek gently. No words were needed. Just that soft gesture, that warmth between them. The bond was no longer new or fragile. It had been tested in fire and storm, and it had held strong. From here on out, Ash and Pikachu weren't just trainer and Pokémon. They were partners. They were friends. They were family. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the trees, waking Ash before the warmth did. He sat up slowly, groaning and stretching. Pikachu was already awake, munching on the last of the berries Ash had packed. Morning, buddy. Pikachu looked up, cheeks full, and squeaked a cheerful, Pika! Ash laughed. Guess someone's feeling better. They packed up their things, doused the fire, and set off down the trail once more. Everything looked brighter in the morning light. The trees seemed greener, the path ahead less daunting. But the biggest difference? Ash wasn't just hoping Pikachu would walk with him now. He knew he would. They passed a bridge over a small river. Ash paused, looking at his reflection again. Messy hair, scratched face, tired eyes. But beside him, Pikachu stood proud and alert, his small reflection mirroring Ash's own. Ash smiled. We've got a long way to go, he said aloud. Lots of challenges, gym battles, trainers, maybe even legendaries. Pikachu's ears perked up. But as long as we face it all together, Ash nodded firmly. We'll be okay. They reached a fork in the road. Ash checked his map. Looks like Viridian City's just this way. Pikachu hopped onto his shoulder, tail swaying with the rhythm of Ash's steps. And with that, they began walking again. Not as strangers bound by fate, but as a team forged by fire, lightning, and a moment of pure selfless trust. Sometimes, it's in the face of danger that we discover what truly matters. Not power, not pride, but trust. The kind that's earned, not given. The kind that turns two souls into one unstoppable force. This is the beginning of that bond. This is the start of everything. There's something magical about watching a friendship grow, not in a rush, not in some instant burst of connection, but slowly, like a sunrise spilling its first light over the hills. That's how it was for Ash and Pikachu. After those first chaotic days, the ones filled with lightning bolts and stubborn stairs, life on the road began to find a rhythm. It wasn't always easy. The forest paths were long. The nights were sometimes cold. And the world outside Pallet Town had its share of surprises. But with every step they took together, the awkwardness faded, replaced by an unspoken understanding. In the soft mornings, before the sun had fully climbed into the sky, Ash would wake to the faint sound of rustling leaves. Sometimes it was just the wind, and sometimes it was Pikachu foraging for berries. Pikachu had this habit bringing back one or two small, bright oran berries and dropping them near Ash's bag. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a little act of care. Ash didn't always mention it, but he noticed. He always noticed. Viridian Forest became their first real classroom. It wasn't just a stretch of trees. It was a place alive with tiny dramas. Caterpies inching along the bark, Pidgeys fluttering between branches, and the occasional flash of something rare deeper in the shade. Ash, wide-eyed and endlessly curious, wanted to see it all. Pikachu. Well, Pikachu was cautious. This wasn't the safe path out of town. This was a world where every rustle could mean a friend or a foe. One morning, they encountered a Caterpie. Pikachu hung back at first, watching as Ash crouched low and spoke gently to the little bug Pokémon. Pikachu wasn't much for new introductions back then, not unless he could size someone up first. But as the minutes passed, he edged closer, nose twitching, eyes curious. When Ash finally caught Caterpie, it wasn't just a victory, it was another piece of their bond forming. Because Pikachu saw something in Ash that day, a patience and kindness that wasn't reserved just for him. Their nights were just as important as their battles. They'd set up camp, often by a quiet stream or under a cluster of stars, and the routine would begin. Ash would get the fire going sometimes with success, sometimes with a cloud of smoke and coughing, and Pikachu would curl up close, the firelight turning his yellow fur into something almost golden. There were moments in that warm glow when Ash would speak softly to Pikachu about his dreams, becoming a Pokémon master, seeing every region, meeting all kinds of Pokémon. Pikachu would listen, ears flicking, as if storing each word for later. The little training sessions started small. Ash didn't push Pikachu too hard, not after everything they'd been through in the beginning. It was about learning each other's rhythms. When Pikachu's tail twitched, Ash learned it meant he was ready to strike. When his ears angled back, it meant something had caught his attention. And Pikachu, in turn, learned the meaning behind Ash's quick nods, his sharp gestures, and the way his voice softened when it was time to take a breather. Their first real test as a team in Viridian Forest came one overcast afternoon when they stumbled into a beedrill swarm. It started with a flash of black and yellow, buzzing wings cutting through the damp air. Then, in a heartbeat, there were dozens. Ash didn't think. He just shouted, "Run!" And run they did, weaving through the trees breathless, until they found a hollow log to hide in. Inside that cramped space, Pikachu pressed against Ash's side, chest rising and falling quickly. The danger outside was real, but so was the trust growing between them. After that, training became more than practice. It became preparation. They worked on Pikachu's agility, darting between tree roots and leaping over low branches. They practiced thundershocks until they could be aimed with pinpoint accuracy. And in between, there were the quieter lessons, the shared meals, the easy silences, and the laughter over small mistakes. In just a few weeks, they were no longer two individuals thrown together by fate. They were starting to move as one. Pikachu no longer hesitated to follow Ash's lead. And Ash was beginning to realize that Pikachu wasn't just a Pokémon in his care. He was a partner, a friend. And as the days stretched on, with the forest gradually giving way to open roads and new challenges ahead, that friendship was becoming the strongest tool they had, stronger than any attack, faster than any dodge. The open road brought new lessons. Outside the shelter of Viridian Forest, the world felt wider, the air less dense with the scent of pine and moss. Hills rolled gently toward the horizon, and the sound of distant rivers became a steady companion. Here, there was more sky than tree, and Ash found himself stealing glances at Pikachu, wondering if the little Pokémon felt as exposed as he sometimes did. They passed through small fields dotted with wildflowers, where flocks of Spearow wheeled overhead in tight formations. Ash remembered all too well the first time he and Pikachu had faced those sharp-beaked birds together. But now there was no flinch in Pikachu's posture when they crossed paths with a Spearow or Pharaoh. His ears stayed high, his gaze steady. He had grown not in size, but in spirit. Every day carried its own rhythm. They would walk until the sun leaned westward, stop to rest near a shaded patch of grass or the curve of a stream, and train. Not every session was about moves and power. Sometimes, Ash would throw a stick or a pebble, and Pikachu would dart after it, practicing precision and speed. Other times, it was about trust Ash giving a quick command, and Pikachu acting without hesitation, even if he didn't see the reason right away. That silent understanding, once shaky and hesitant, was becoming second nature. One afternoon, in the gentle heat of early summer, they came across a wild oddish grazing in the tall grass. Ash crouched low, whispering encouragement, his eyes tracking the small, round Pokémon. Pikachu didn't wait for instructions. He padded forward, not aggressively, but with the same cautious curiosity he'd once shown Caterpie. Ash realized something then. Pikachu had learned from him, just as much as he'd learned from Pikachu. The oddish, sensing no threat, continued nibbling before bouncing away into the brush. They didn't catch it, and Ash didn't mind. It wasn't about the capture. It was about moving in sync without needing words. Nights outside the forest had a different feel. The stars seemed sharper, and the wind carried the sense of far-off places. Ash would lay back on his sleeping bag. Pikachu curled near his shoulder, both of them watching the constellations drift slowly above. Sometimes, a sound in the dark, the chirp of a cricketune, or the splash of a polywag in a nearby pond would draw their attention, and they would lie in stillness, listening together. It was in those quiet hours that their bond grew in ways training couldn't touch. The challenges weren't always about battles. There were days when the road tested their patience more than their strength. Rain would turn dirt paths into slick, muddy trails, and wind would steal the warmth from their campfire before it could take hold. On one such night, the storm was relentless rain slicing sideways, thunder rolling in heavy waves. Ash found a shallow cave in the hillside, and they huddled inside, the sound of water echoing off the walls. Pikachu, soaked and shivering, leaned into Ash's jacket, and Ash wrapped his arms around him, murmuring reassurance neither of them could fully hear over the storm. By morning, the skies had cleared, and the road stretched on as if nothing had happened, but they both knew the night before had changed something. Over time, victories began to feel different. It wasn't just the thrill of winning, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had achieved something together. When Pikachu dodged an attack perfectly, Ash didn't need to shout his pride. It was there in the small smile, in the quick meeting of eyes before moving on to the next move. And when Ash made a split-second decision that worked, Pikachu didn't need to nod. The way his tail flicked and his stance shifted was enough. They were still early in their journey, still far from any final goal, but Ash could feel it. They were becoming something solid, something unshakable. Their pace on the road was no longer set by the map or the distance to the next town. It was set by them, by the shared steps, the shared rests, and the shared resolve to face whatever came next, side by side. And though neither of them could have put it into words, they both knew that this growth, slow, steady, and built on every small moment between battles, was the true heart of their journey. The days bled into one another in a way that didn't dull them, but softened their edges. The rhythm of the road became less about reaching a destination and more about being in motion, each turn and slope bringing something they hadn't seen before. In the lowlands beyond the hills, the land opened into wide stretches of grass where the wind moved like a living thing, combing over the blades in great rippling waves. Pikachu would race ahead sometimes, ears flat to the wind, skimming just above the ground as if trying to match the speed of the swaying fields. Ash would let him run, knowing there was no need to call him back. Pikachu always circled back on his own, trotting at Ash's side as if the burst of freedom had only made him more eager to keep pace. One afternoon, they followed the sound of rushing water until they found a river cutting through a small gorge. The sun was high, the rocks warm underfoot, and the air filled with the scent of wet stone. Pikachu edged close to the water, watching Goldeen flick in and out of the shallows. Without warning, he sprang forward, landing with all four paws on a flat stone in the middle of the stream. The splash sent the fish scattering, and Pikachu looked back with an expression that was equal parts pride and mischief. Ash laughed, shaking his head, and stepped in to join him, the cool current swirling around his ankles. They stayed there longer than they planned, letting the sun dry their feet before shouldering their packs again. Encounters on the road were rarely predictable. Sometimes it was a friendly face, a traveling merchant with spare berries, or another trainer willing to trade advice instead of challenges. Other times it was something stranger. Once they woke to find their camp surrounded by a dozen centret, standing tall on their tails to peer at the intruders. Pikachu had bristled at first, but when the centret only chatted among themselves and hopped away, he relaxed, leaning lightly against Ash's leg as if to say, "All right, they're harmless." Their training shifted with the terrain. In the open grasslands, it was about speed sprints from one marker to another, Pikachu darting in arcs to simulate dodging attacks. In rocky areas, it was about balance and footwork, Pikachu leaping from stone to stone while Ash tested him with sudden commands. Each new setting was a chance to adapt, and each adaptation made them sharper. But growth didn't always come in planned lessons. One evening, as the sun was fading into a line of gold at the horizon, they stumbled into a skirmish between a beedrill swarm and a stubborn Pidgeotto. The air buzzed with wings and the sharp hum of stingers. Ash froze for half a second, then saw Pikachu step forward on instinct. Without waiting for a command, he unleashed a crackling thunder wave that rolled through the swarm like a breaking wave, stunning the Beedrill long enough for the Pidgeotto to escape into the trees. When the last of the swarm vanished, Pikachu's chest was heaving, his fur puffed in every direction from the static. Ash knelt down, resting a hand on his shoulder. Nice work. He didn't need to say more. The way Pikachu's tail gave a small, satisfied flick was answer enough. At night, when the firelight flickered against the dark, Ash would sometimes think about how far they'd come from that first day outside Pallet Town. Pikachu wasn't the same Pokémon who had once resisted even walking beside him. And Ash wasn't the same boy who had thought every battle could be won with power alone. Somewhere between the hills and rivers, between the storms and the quiet nights, they had started listening to each other in ways words couldn't reach. One cool morning, they awoke to a pale mist draped over the land. The air was still, and every sound seemed softer. Ash packed slowly, listening to the distant calls of unseen Pokémon. Pikachu was unusually quiet, watching the mist curl around his paws. When they set out, they walked in silence for a long while. There was no rush, no urgent destination. It was enough to move forward together, their steps muffled in the damp grass. By midday, the mist had lifted, revealing a long ridge that overlooked the road ahead. From up there, they could see miles of rolling green, dotted with tiny lakes and threaded with narrow dirt paths. Ash rested his pack on the ground, and Pikachu climbed onto a flat rock, scanning the horizon with bright eyes. "Looks like there's more out there than we can see from here," Ash said softly. Pikachu glanced back at him, then returned his gaze to the distance, as if agreeing. That night, their camp was in the shadow of a lone sycamore, its wide branches catching the moonlight. Ash lay awake for a while, listening to Pikachu's even breathing. He thought about the days behind them and the road ahead, and for the first time, he didn't feel the weight of how far there was to go. The journey didn't feel like something to get through anymore. It felt like something to live inside, step by step. Somewhere in that understanding, they had grown into more than trainer and Pokémon. They were partners in battles, in challenges, in every quiet mile of the road. And though they couldn't have marked the exact moment it happened, both knew they had crossed into something unshakable, something that would carry them further than any map could show. The campfire had long since burned down to embers, their faint glow painting warm, flickering halos on the ground. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly, as if the whole world had slowed to watch over the two of them. Pikachu lay curled up against Ash's chest, his soft fur rising and falling with every steady breath. Ash's fingers traced slow circles over Pikachu's back, each movement unhurried, almost reverent. He could feel the quiet rhythm of Pikachu's heartbeat through the warmth of his tiny body, a comfort far deeper than words could ever hold. The forest around them was hushed. Only the occasional rustle of leaves stirred the silence, like nature itself was careful not to disturb this moment. Ash wasn't thinking about battles or journeys. He wasn't thinking about the next town or the next challenge. Instead, his thoughts lingered here in the present, where every small detail seemed magnified. The faint scent of the grass, the softness of Pikachu's fur beneath his fingertips, the way the fire's glow deepened the gold in Pikachu's cheeks. Pikachu shifted slightly, snuggling in closer, his tiny paws pressing gently against Ash's shirt. "Pika," he murmured, a sound so soft it was almost lost to the night air. Ash smiled, his eyes half-lidded but awake enough to soak in every second. "I'm right here, buddy," Ash whispered, his voice carrying that deep, quiet assurance. "You only give to someone who's always been there for you." His words weren't hurried. Each one lingered in the air for a moment before dissolving into the stillness. The night deepened. A soft breeze swept across the clearing, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and distant rain. Ash's hair stirred slightly, and he pulled Pikachu closer, shielding him from the cool air. Pikachu let out a content sigh, his tail giving a small, lacy flick before going still again. It wasn't the kind of moment that would ever make headlines. No one else would see it. No one else would know. But to Ash, it was heavier and more beautiful than any victory. It was a moment of stillness that felt infinite. He looked up at the sky, letting his gaze drift between the constellations. Somewhere out there, journeys waited. Someday, they'd rise and walk toward them. But not tonight. Tonight was about slowing down, about breathing in sync with someone who had been beside him since the very beginning. A single ember floated up from the fire pit, glowing softly as it twisted into the night before fading into nothing. Ash watched it disappear, feeling the way time seemed to stretch and dissolve in moments like these. "Remember when we first set out?" Ash murmured almost to himself. "We didn't even know what we were doing, but we kept going." Pikachu's ear twitched. He opened his eyes halfway, just enough to look up at Ash with that familiar, trusting gaze. The kind of look that didn't need a reply, because it was already full of understanding. Ash brushed his thumb over Pikachu's ear, gently, as if the simple act could say all the things he didn't put into words. Gratitude, trust, love, all of it, wrapped into small, unhurried movements. The forest quiet deepened even further. Somewhere far off, a noctowl called, the sound low and soothing. The night air was cool against Ash's skin, but the steady warmth of Pikachu in his arms balanced it perfectly. It struck Ash that they didn't need anything else right now. Not a destination, not a plan, not even words. Just this. The weight of Pikachu in his arms, the soft flicker of light on their faces, the easy rhythm of two heartbeats aligning. Ash closed his eyes, breathing in the peace around them. It was a peace that didn't rush, that didn't demand. The kind of peace that seeps into your bones slowly, quietly, until you realize you've stopped holding on to anything else. Pikachu shifted again, nestling his head against Ash's collarbone. Ash felt the small tickle of fur under his chin, and he smiled in the dark. His hand rested fully now on Pikachu's back, no longer moving just there, steady and present. The stars above seemed brighter now, though maybe that was just the way Ash was seeing them, through a lens of stillness he hadn't felt in a long time. Each one looked like a quiet promise, suspended in the endless night. For a while, neither of them moved. They didn't need to. The fire's last warmth clung to the air. The breeze carried the night's soft scents, and their breaths matched without trying. If there was a word for this moment, Ash didn't know it. Maybe there wasn't one. Maybe it was the kind of thing you only feel deep, slow, and sure, like the weight of someone you've carried with you for years, and the quiet certainty that you'll carry them for many more. Somewhere in that stillness, Ash's breathing slowed. his grip around Pikachu easing into the kind of hold that meant sleep was near. Pikachu's eyes drifted closed again, his last small murmur lost into Ash's shirt. And as the night held them, they stayed like that, unmoving, unhurried, two shapes against the quiet earth, their warmth steady against the cool dark. The world could wait until morning. They reached the city in a slow, easy, light stone buildings folded into the hillside like the steady hands of someone who had built a place to last. Pewter City smelled faintly of warm rock and old wood, a scent that felt both solid and kind. It suited them, a place where weight and patience mattered more than flash. Ash walked with a measured step, Pikachu balanced lightly on his shoulder. There was a quietness to the morning. The streets were not empty, but the noise of crowds had not yet begun. A few early trainers moved like shadows, muttering strategies or feeding Pokémon little snacks as they walked. The gym itself rose off the main square, its low, stout walls giving the impression of a place that expected thoughtful visitors rather than hurried ones. Standing before the gym door, Ash felt a little of the same small flutter he'd felt the night he left Pallet Town. Not fear exactly, but an awareness that something important was about to be asked of them. He ran a slow hand through his hair, felt the familiar weight of the map in his pocket, and looked down. Pikachu blinked up, ears tilted. No words were necessary. The look between them was enough. Inside, the gym smelled of cool stone and dust that had settled into long, peaceful shapes. The training ground was simple. Ledges of rock, a clean, broad floor, and a few boulders arranged like gentle obstacles. Rocks, Ash noted, were patient. They held their place and wore down a thing's edges over time. Facing a rock-type gym would not be about furious power. It would be about timing, precision, and knowing when to rest. They met the gym leader in a quiet, unshowy corner, a presence that felt more like steadiness than spectacle. He smiled without much fanfare, and his voice was low, as if he were talking more to the idea of training than to them. He didn't rush them through rules or lectures. Instead, he asked one careful question. What did Ash hope to learn from this battle? Ash thought for a moment. It was a question he hadn't expected to be asked so simply. He answered softly. Not only to earn a badge, but to learn how to move with Pikachu as one. The leader nodded, appreciation in that small motion, and said the match would begin when they both were ready. Preparation was not frantic. It was deliberate. Ash and Pikachu found a quiet corner of the gym where the light fell warm through a narrow window and spent their moments in small, meaningful practice. They walked through sequences again and again. A quick dodge, a low lunge, a measured release of electricity that would never linger longer than needed. Ash learned once more to trust Pikachu's small signals, the way his tail would flick a fraction sooner before a sudden move. The soft breath he took when he was ready. There were also more subtle lessons that day. A rock-type strength registered not in sudden strikes, but in its tendency to block and absorb. Ash practiced not just attacking, but probing little taps and feints that sought to reveal a pattern or a weakness. Pikachu responded to the rhythm, matching Ash's tempo, his bright cheeks dimming and glowing in quiet beats that became their shared language. When the time came to step onto the gym floor, they did so with gentle steadiness. The room felt like a held breath. The air was not loud, but every small sound felt amplified: the scrape of a shoe, the soft whisper of breath, the faint shifting of stone. a rock-type Pokémon emerged. Big, patient, and indifferent to hurry. It moved with a slow confidence, each step measured and heavy, a reminder that some battles asked for endurance rather than speed. Ash didn't shout commands. He offered calm cues and steady assurance. "Take it easy," he said in a voice that could have been for himself as much as for Pikachu. Pikachu inhaled and stepped forward, feet sure, tail balanced. The first exchange was not dramatic. It was a study. Electric spark met solid stone with a soft, ringing sound that was almost musical in its restraint. The rock absorbed and gave in small ways, and Pikachu backed, careful, learning how the opponent would respond. At a quiet moment between moves, Ash found himself smiling without meaning to. There was no need for grand gestures. The subtle skill of finding a rhythm, of nudging an opening and trusting the other to move, felt like a warm kind of victory already. Poke battles, he realized, could be more like conversations than arguments when both sides listen. The leader watched with a steady gaze, neither surprised nor overly impressed, merely present. Each time Pikachu adapted. Each time Ash read that adaptation and adjusted. A small acknowledgement passed between them and the leader. This was not a test about who could shout louder or attack harder. It was about how two beings could learn each other's cadence and move as one. Slowly, intentionally, the match unfolded. Pikachu discovered an angle where lightning could slip between rocks rather than hit them head-on. Ash learned to pause just enough so his partner could gather the small, bright energy he needed. The gym's heavy Pokémon, patient and unyielding, found its pattern altered by these quiet, careful maneuvers. By the time they reached a pause in the match, not a dramatic finish but a gentle settling, both Ash and Pikachu felt something changed. A new depth to their teamwork. The room did not erupt in applause. There was no thunder of triumph. Instead, the leader stepped forward, offered a quiet nod, and said that the badge would be given not for a single moment of overpowering strength, but for the steady demonstration of understanding between trainer and Pokémon. They left the gym with the badge tucked quietly in Ash's bag, the weight of it familiar and calm. Outside, sunlight warmed the stone steps. Ash and Pikachu sat for a long time on the edge, letting the experience sink in. It was not glory they carried, but a calm proof that in slow, attentive ways they could face what the world set before them, together. The city streets felt different when they stepped out of the gym again. Not louder or busier, just fuller, as if the stones themselves had stored the echo of what had happened inside. Ash walked slowly, hands tucked in his pockets, Pikachu's tail swaying in a gentle rhythm that matched their pace. There was no rush to be anywhere. The badge in his bag was enough proof they had moved forward. They wandered without a plan, letting the slope of the streets guide them. At a small park, set into the hillside, Ash paused. The benches were warm in the sun, and the sound of a shallow fountain trickled in a way that made time feel wider. Pikachu hopped down from his shoulder and padded over to the water's edge, watching the ripples with tilted ears. Ash followed, crouching beside him. "We did all right," he said softly. The kind of voice you use when you don't want to disturb the quiet around you. Pikachu glanced up, cheeks dimly sparking in acknowledgement. They both knew the battle had been more about learning than winning. For a while they stayed there, not speaking. A pair of Pidgey fluttered down nearby, pecking gently at the ground, and Pikachu's gaze followed them, curious but calm. The steady burble of the fountain, the smell of warmed grass, the way the sun slanted just enough to soften the edges of things. It all made the moment feel settled. Later, as the shadows began to stretch, Ash suggested they visit the outskirts of the city. "If we're going to keep moving forward," he murmured, "we should keep practicing, but no rush." Pikachu's ears twitched in agreement, and they headed down a quiet path leading towards the foothills. The land shifted gradually. Stone walls gave way to open stretches of rock and soil, dotted with low shrubs. The air here had a drier scent, sun-baked earth, and a faint mineral tang. It reminded Ash of the gym in its patience. But out here the rocks weren't arranged for battle. They were simply part of the land. They chose a flat patch with a few scattered boulders. Ash set his bag down and crouched beside Pikachu. "We don't need to go hard today," he said. "Just feel out the ground, the way it moves under you." Pikachu stepped onto a large, sun-warmed stone, his small paws pressing into its uneven surface. He shifted his weight, testing balance, moving in slow arcs. Ash watched carefully, noting the way Pikachu adjusted with each step. In the gym, they'd learned precision here. They could learn adaptability. They began a quiet drill, Pikachu weaving between boulders, pausing to adjust, darting forward only when the space felt right. Ash didn't bark commands. Instead, he gave small cues: a raised hand, a tap on his leg, a soft whistle letting Pikachu decide the timing. The slower pace meant mistakes didn't feel like failures. They were simply pauses to find the right rhythm again. A light breeze passed over them, carrying the sound of distant wind through rock crevices. Pikachu stopped at the far end of the clearing, ears pricked toward the hills. Ash followed his gaze. For a moment, neither moved. Out there, beyond the edges of the city, challenges waited: bigger gyms, stronger opponents, unfamiliar terrain. But right now, there was no hurry. They practiced until the light turned gold. Ash noticed that Pikachu's movements had shifted more fluid now, less reaction and more intention. Even in the smallest jump from one stone to another, there was a sense of decision. Ash smiled to himself. These were the kinds of gains that didn't show up in a single battle, but built a foundation for all the ones ahead. When they finally sat down on a broad, flat rock, Pikachu leaned lightly against Ash's leg. The warmth of the day still clung to the stone beneath them, and the air smelled faintly of dry grass. Ash let his hand rest on Pikachu's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "Next gym might not be like Pewter," Ash said, almost to himself, "but we'll handle it, like this, step by step." Pikachu's tail tapped lightly against the rock. Not a sharp motion, but a small, steady beat, the kind of response that didn't need words. As the last of the sunlight slipped behind the ridge, they gathered their things and made their way back towards the city lights, each step unhurried. The day had been about more than a badge. It had been about understanding the spaces between the battles, the quiet work that turned two individuals into a single moving rhythm. By the time they reached their small inn, the streets were wrapped in the kind of evening stillness that made the whole city feel like it was holding its breath. Ash opened the door softly, Pikachu hopping down to pad toward their bed. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The shared ease between them said enough. When Ash finally lay back, the badge still tucked safely in his bag. Pikachu curled in the crook of his arm. The faint sound of night insects hummed through the open window, and Ash's last thought before sleep was simple, not about victory or loss, but about the way each step forward now felt like they were walking it together, without hurry, without doubt. The distant rumble of thunder rolled through the dense forest, shaking the branches above. Dark clouds had begun gathering on the horizon, turning the vibrant greens of the trees into muted shadows. Pikachu's ears twitched uneasily. Rain wasn't unusual in this part of the region, but this storm felt different, angrier, heavier, almost like it had a purpose. Pikachu quickened his pace, his small paws padding softly against the damp earth. The air was thick with electricity, and his tail flicked instinctively, sensing the charge building in the atmosphere. Lightning was his element, but this kind of wild, untamed surge was not something to take lightly. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed through the trees. Pika! Pikachu's head snapped toward the sound. It wasn't just the wind. Someone was in trouble. Without hesitation, he darted in the direction of the cry, weaving between roots and ducking under low branches. He emerged into a small clearing and froze. There, tangled in a mess of vines, was a small Pichu. Its cheeks sparked weakly as it struggled to break free. Every time it tried, the thorny vines tightened, cutting into its tiny limbs. Pikachu's heart clenched. Pichu was still so young. It couldn't have wandered far from its family. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle it. Pika Pika, he said softly, trying to reassure the frightened Pokémon. The Pichu whimpered, eyes wide with fear, but stopped struggling. Pikachu took a deep breath, his cheeks beginning to glow with soft static. He aimed carefully, letting out a precise, low-voltage thundershock. The vines sizzled and snapped apart, releasing the little one without harming it. Pichu tumbled forward into Pikachu's arms, trembling. Pikachu patted its head gently. There, you're safe now. But before they could move, the storm roared above them. A blinding flash lit up the clearing, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, and Pikachu knew they had to find shelter fast. He nudged Pichu along, guiding it toward the deeper part of the forest, where the trees grew denser. The canopy above caught most of the rain, but the wind was picking up, bending branches dangerously low. Pikachu could smell the ozone in the air. Lightning was about to strike nearby. They found refuge under a large hollow log, just wide enough for the two of them to huddle inside. Pichu pressed close to Pikachu, still shaking, and Pikachu draped his tail protectively over the little one. Outside, the storm was relentless. Rain hammered the forest floor, and the wind howled through the leaves. Lightning tore through the sky in jagged streaks, illuminating the world in brief, stark flashes. Pikachu felt the electrical energy dancing through his own body, resonating with the chaos outside. Then, he heard it. Through the noise of the storm came a sound that didn't belong. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Pikachu's eyes narrowed. It wasn't a Pokémon. The steps were too slow, too calculated. He peeked out from the hollow, scanning the rain-drenched clearing beyond. And there it was, a shadowy figure, partially obscured by the sheets of rain, moving with purpose. A human. But this one didn't carry the warmth and curiosity he had known from trainers before. This presence felt wrong. The figure stopped, crouching near the spot where Pikachu had rescued Pichu. Even through the rain, Pikachu saw it pick up a small metal device from the ground. The object blinked red once before going dark. A tracking beacon. Pikachu's fur bristled. Someone had been watching. The figure stood again, glancing around the forest, and then slowly walked away, disappearing into the storm. Pikachu didn't move until the sound of footsteps was gone. When he turned back, Pichu was looking up at him, wide-eyed and confused. Pikachu forced a small smile to calm it, but his mind was racing. If that beacon had been active before he found it, then whoever placed it knew they were here. The storm finally began to ease after what felt like hours. The rain softened, and the deep rumble of thunder moved farther away. The forest smelled fresh and alive, but Pikachu's thoughts were heavy. He had set out on his journey to see the world, but now something more serious was unfolding. Someone, something, was tracking Pokémon, and if they had a reason to target a defenseless Pichu, it couldn't be good. Pikachu glanced at the little one, now dozing against him. He couldn't just leave it alone. Whether Pichu liked it or not, they were partners now, at least until Pikachu could get it somewhere safe. But deep down, Pikachu knew this wasn't just about one rescue. This was the start of something much bigger. The storm had reached its peak. Dark clouds swirled like angry cotton candy in the sky. Lightning bolts stabbed the ground as if the heavens were having a tantrum, and in the center of it all stood Pikachu, tiny, trembling, but determined. Pikachu! He roared, sparks dancing across his fur like miniature fireworks. The crowd, if you could call it that, it was mostly confused villagers and 3 old men playing chess under a plastic sheet, gasped in unison. This was no ordinary day. This was no ordinary Pikachu. This was the moment he had trained for his entire, 2 weeks, but still, it felt legendary. Across the muddy field stood the opponent, the mighty Raichu, taller, bulkier, with a tail shaped like a weaponized lightning blade. Raichu looked down at Pikachu the way a big brother looks at the sibling who keeps stealing their fries. Ready to lose, little spark? Raichu smirked. Pikachu's cheeks glowed. Pika pika, he said softly. Translation? You wish oversized flashlight? The referee, an unusually serious Snorlax, wearing a raincoat, raised a paw. The battle began. Raichu struck first, sending a wave of electricity so bright that the chess players momentarily thought it was morning again. Pikachu barely dodged, his tiny paws slipping in the mud. His fur stood on end, not from the lightning, but from sheer determination. Focus, Pikachu! Shouted Ash from the sidelines, wearing an outfit that was entirely inappropriate for the rain cap backward, sneakers already soaked, and a jacket that did nothing to stop water. Remember the plan? The plan. Yes, that ridiculous, risky, almost cartoonishly impossible plan. Pikachu took a deep breath. Raichu attacked again, this time with a thunder punch that cracked the ground. Mud splashed, water rippled, and the smell of ozone filled the air. Pikachu pretended to stumble, making himself look vulnerable. Raichu grinned and rushed forward, tail glowing like molten metal. Now, this was the moment. Pikachu darted to the side at the last second, leading Raichu straight into the giant puddle in the center of the field. In that split second, Pikachu unleashed everything, every volt, every spark, every ounce of stubbornness he had straight into the puddle. The shockwave was so intense, it lit up the entire field like a stadium during the World Cup final. Raichu froze mid-step, electricity crackling around him in a dazzling display of yellow and white. The crowd oohed. Someone fainted. One of the chess players accidentally checkmated himself. When the light faded, Raichu wobbled, his fur puffed up like an overcooked marshmallow, and fell. The Snorlax referee, who had somehow managed to stay awake for this moment, lifted a paw and declared, "Pikachu wins," in the slowest, most unenthusiastic tone possible. Pikachu dropped to his knees, exhausted but smiling. His cheeks still flickered with tiny sparks. The battle had taken everything from him, but he had done it. He had proven himself. Ash ran onto the field, scooping Pikachu into his arms. "I knew you could do it, buddy," he laughed, spinning around despite slipping twice in the mud. Pikachu nuzzled him, whispering a soft "Pika." That meant, yeah, you doubted me at least once. The villagers cheered. The storm began to clear, sunlight breaking through the clouds, as if the sky itself wanted to congratulate the little yellow hero. Even the chess players finally put away their board to clap. Raichu, now sitting up, gave Pikachu a small nod of respect. "Not bad, little spark," he said. Pikachu grinned. Rivalry or not, victory was sweeter when it came with mutual respect. As the celebrations continued, Ash and Pikachu walked toward the horizon, the wet grass squishing under their feet. Pikachu's fur was messy, his paws were muddy, but his eyes sparkled. "Where to next?" Ash asked. Pikachu simply looked ahead, the wind ruffling his ears. There would be more battles, more challenges, more days when the odds seemed impossible. But for now, for today, they had won. And somewhere, deep inside, Pikachu knew the world was a little brighter when you never stopped fighting, no matter how small you were. With one last crackle of static, Pikachu leapt onto Ash's shoulder. The adventure continued. But this chapter, this storm, this victory, was theirs forever. The sun was setting over the horizon, bathing the road ahead in a soft golden glow. Ash walked slowly, his cap tilted forward, shadows falling over his eyes. Pikachu padded alongside him, the rhythmic patter of its small feet, the only sound breaking the silence. Neither spoke for a while. They had won battles before, faced impossible odds together, but today had been different. The opponent's Pokémon wasn't just strong, it had pushed Pikachu to the edge, leaving Ash to question if he had done the right thing, pushing for victory. Pikachu glanced up at him, its ears twitching. "Pika?" Ash forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You did great today, buddy. Really great." He reached down, giving Pikachu a light scratch behind the ears. But the hesitation in his voice didn't go unnoticed. Pikachu slowed its pace, watching Ash carefully. They had known each other long enough to feel the unspoken weight between them. By the time they reached a small clearing by the river, the last rays of sunlight had faded into deep orange and purple. Ash set his bag down and knelt by the water's edge. He could see Pikachu's reflection beside his own, both of them looking a little worn out. "Pikachu, do you think I'm pushing you too hard?" Ash's voice was quiet, almost lost to the gentle rush of the river. "I mean, I know you always give your best, but sometimes I wonder if I'm asking too much." Pikachu tilted its head, then hopped onto the rock beside him. Its tiny paw rested against his arm. "Pika, Pika," it said firmly, eyes locked on his. That single look full of determination and reassurance was enough to ease a bit of the guilt in Ash's chest. Pikachu wasn't just his partner, it was his friend, and friends didn't let each other carry doubts alone. Ash chuckled softly, shaking his head. You always know what to say without saying much, don't you? They sat together for a long moment, listening to the steady rhythm of the river. It wasn't the thrill of a battle or the rush of victory. It was something quieter, deeper. The kind of moment that reminded Ash why he had started this journey in the first place. Winning was great, but it was never the reason. It was about growing together, learning together, and never letting go, no matter how rough the road got. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them, and Ash leaned back, staring at the stars, just starting to appear. You know, he said softly, I think some of our best moments haven't even been in battles. It's times like this. Just you and me, talking about nothing and everything. Pikachu's cheeks sparked faintly, like a tiny flicker of happiness. It curled up against his side, its fur warm and familiar. Ash rested his hand on Pikachu's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of its breathing. Somewhere in that quiet, all the noise in Ash's head faded away. The night grew cooler, and Ash pulled out a blanket from his bag, wrapping it loosely around them both. He thought about all the times Pikachu had stood between him and danger, not because it had to, but because it wanted to. He thought about the countless mornings they'd woken up in strange places, sharing breakfast before heading out to face whatever the world had waiting for them. These weren't moments that made it onto a scoreboard, but they were the ones Ash knew he would remember forever. Pikachu, he said suddenly, I'm not just proud of you because you're strong. I'm proud because you're you. No matter what happens, you're always there. And I hope you know I'll always be here for you too. Pikachu's eyes softened, and without hesitation, it leapt into Ash's arms. He caught it, laughing quietly as the little Pokémon nuzzled against his cheek. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about knowing they had each other's backs, always. Somewhere in the distance, a nocturne called, and the moon climbed higher into the sky. Ash didn't feel the need to move. They had traveled so far, met so many friends, and faced so many challenges. But sitting here, holding Pikachu close, felt like the most important moment of them all. As the river whispered beside them, and the stars scattered across the night, Ash realized that battles might have brought them together, but it was moments like this that made their bond unbreakable. And no trophy, no victory could ever compare to that. Ash and Pikachu's journey had brought them through countless towns and forests. Yet it was in the quieter stretches between battles that some of their deepest moments unfolded. One cool evening, after a long day of walking, Ash sat near a small campfire while Pikachu curled beside him. The flames flickered in Pikachu's wide eyes, and Ash noticed how his partner's ears drooped a little more than usual. You tired, buddy? He asked gently. Pikachu gave a small nod, but it wasn't exhaustion from walking. It was the lingering ache from the battle earlier that day. They had won, but Pikachu had taken some hard hits, protecting Ash's other Pokémon. Ash reached into his bag, pulling out a small cloth to gently wipe the dirt from Pikachu's fur. You always give it your all. Even when I don't ask you to, Ash said quietly. Pikachu just leaned into Ash's touch, his cheeks sparking faintly in comfort. The fire crackled between them, and for a while, there were no words, just the warmth of the flames and the steady sound of their breathing. A light breeze rustled the trees around them, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. Ash found himself thinking about their very first days together, when Pikachu wouldn't even let him get close. It was almost funny now, how far they'd come. You know, Pikachu? I don't think I've ever said it enough, Ash murmured, voice low, as if sharing a secret. I trust you with everything I've got. You're more than just my first Pokémon. You're my best friend. Pikachu's ears perked up, and he looked at Ash with those bright, understanding eyes. Then, without hesitation, Pikachu climbed into Ash's lap and curled up there, as if to say the feeling was mutual. The next morning brought a different kind of test. They reached a small village where an elderly woman was struggling to rebuild her home after a storm. Ash didn't hesitate to help, and Pikachu worked alongside him, using little bursts of electricity to power tools, and even lighting up the dark interior so they could work faster. By the end of the day, the woman's eyes glistened with tears as she thanked them. Ash smiled, but it was Pikachu who trotted up to her and pressed his tiny paw into her hand, making her laugh through her tears. Moments like this weren't about winning battles or earning badges. They were about making a difference, no matter how small. Ash realized that these were the days that truly defined their journey. Later that week, the pair found themselves in the middle of a heavy rainstorm. They took shelter under a large rock outcrop, shivering as water dripped steadily around them. Ash shrugged off his jacket and draped it over Pikachu, even though it left him cold and damp. Pikachu stared up at him, clearly concerned. Ash just chuckled softly. You keep me going, buddy. It's the least I can do. The storm stretched on through the night, and by morning, the ground was slick with mud. Pikachu's fur was still a little damp, but Ash made sure to dry him carefully before they set off. Neither of them complained. They had weathered worse together, and somehow, the shared discomfort only made their bond stronger. One evening, while camping near a cliffside that overlooked the sea, Ash and Pikachu sat in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The water shimmered in shades of gold and crimson, waves rolling gently against the shore far below. Ash rested his hand on the ground, and Pikachu placed his paw on top of it without a word. Someday, Ash said softly, I know we'll reach the top. We'll be the best, together. But even if that day takes forever to come, he trailed off, smiling faintly. I wouldn't trade any of this for anything. Pikachu tilted his head, eyes narrowing in a gentle smile, and the two just sat there until the last light faded from the sky. Their travels eventually brought them to a mountain path, where they encountered a group of young trainers struggling to find their way. Ash could have just pointed them in the right direction, but instead, he and Pikachu walked with them all the way down the trail, telling stories, laughing, and making sure they reached safety. It was on that trail, as they said their goodbyes, that one of the younger trainers whispered to Ash, You and Pikachu, you're like one person. You just know what the other is thinking. Ash smiled at that, glancing down at Pikachu. Yeah, he replied. We've been through enough to speak without words. By the time they made camp that night, Pikachu was already dozing beside Ash, the rhythmic sound of crickets filling the air. Ash lay back, looking at the stars, and whispered, Thanks for sticking with me, buddy, no matter what. and though Pikachu was half asleep, his tail gave a small, happy twitch, a silent promise that he always would. The air in the Pokémon Center that evening was quiet, except for the faint hum of the healing machines in the corner. Ash sat slouched in a chair, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together tightly. Across from him, Pikachu lay on a padded bed, its tiny chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. The earlier battle hadn't been the toughest they'd faced, but Pikachu had taken a nasty hit protecting Ash from a surprise attack. That moment, the instant Pikachu leapt forward without hesitation, kept replaying in Ash's mind like a stubborn loop. He had called out, warning Pikachu to dodge, but instead, Pikachu had turned its head with a stubborn, almost playful glint in its eye, as if saying, "I've got this." Then the flash, the impact, and Pikachu hitting the ground. Ash had run forward, heart hammering harder than in any gym match, cradling the small limp body in his arms. Now, hours later, the adrenaline was gone, but the worry clung to him like a shadow. He glanced at Pikachu again. The yellow fur looked ruffled, the usually bright red cheeks dull. Ash swallowed hard. "You've got to wake up soon, buddy," he whispered. The door to the Pokémon Center opened, and Misty stepped in holding 2 steaming cups. She placed one in front of him. "You've been sitting here for hours. Drink something before you fall over." Ash shook his head. "I'm fine." His voice came out hoarse. Misty's gaze softened. "You're not fine, and neither is Pikachu. But Nurse Joy said it's going to be okay. You trust her, right?" Ash let out a breath. "Yeah, I trust her. He stopped, looking down at the cup, watching the steam curl up and vanish into the air. "Every time we battle, I think about winning. But today, I thought about what it would be like if I lost Pikachu. Not the battle, Pikachu." The quiet between them was heavier than any silence in the heat of a match. When the sound of small paws pattering against the tile reached Ash's ears, he turned so fast his chair squeaked against the floor. Pikachu stood there, still looking tired but very much awake, ears perked and eyes locked on him. "Pikachu!" Ash bolted forward, kneeling and wrapping his arms around his partner. Pikachu squeaked in surprise, then relaxed into the hug, pressing its warm cheek against Ash's. "I'm sorry," Ash murmured. "I should have been faster, smarter. Pikachu cut him off with a short, reassuring "Pika!" and gave him a light shock. Ash winced, then laughed. A real laugh, the kind that shook away the tension. "Yeah, I get it. Stop worrying so much, right?" From that day, something shifted. It wasn't about chasing victories anymore, at least. Not only that, it was about making sure they never forgot why they were on this journey together. Weeks later, they found themselves camped by a quiet river, the sky painted orange by the setting sun. Ash was lying back on the grass, hands behind his head, while Pikachu dozed beside him, its tail flicking lazily in the air. The battle that morning had been tough, but they'd come out stronger for it, and now the world felt still, in the best way. Ash reached over, gently tapping Pikachu's tail. "Hey, remember when we first met? You wouldn't even get in the Pokeball. I thought you hated me." Pikachu's eyes opened halfway, and it gave a slow, sleepy blink, as if to say, "I didn't hate you. I just didn't know you yet." Ash chuckled. "Guess I didn't know you either. But now," he glanced at the horizon, the glow of the sun reflecting off the water. "Now I can't imagine doing this without you." The wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of distant bird Pokémon calling to each other. Pikachu rolled over and rested its head on Ash's arm, the simple gesture saying more than words ever could. Not every emotional moment was born from danger. Some came quietly, like this one, sneaking up when the battles were over and the world wasn't asking for anything except to be appreciated. Those moments made the hard days worth it. One evening, they arrived in a small village that was holding a festival in honor of electric-type Pokémon. Strings of lanterns lit the streets, each glowing with a soft golden light. Children ran past with Pikachu-shaped masks, laughter echoing through the air. Ash felt his chest warm at the sight, glancing down at Pikachu, whose ears twitched with curiosity. "Looks like you're the star of the show," Ash said. Pikachu tilted its head towards him, then bounded ahead, leading the way through the bustling crowd. People stopped to greet them, some crouching down to give Pikachu a gentle pat. Ash watched, noticing how Pikachu's eyes sparkled with every interaction. That night, they sat by a bonfire, sharing roasted berries someone had gifted them. Music played in the distance, and fireflies danced in the darkness. Pikachu was curled up against Ash's side, both of them full and content. Ash glanced down at his partner and thought about how far they'd come, not in miles, but in trust, in understanding. He remembered every time Pikachu had stood by him, every risk taken, every choice made not for the sake of victory, but for each other. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Pikachu shifted closer, and Ash rested a hand gently on its back, the firelight flickering against them both. The forest had grown quiet after the rain, the earthy scent still lingering in the air. Ash and Pikachu were making their way along a narrow trail, their shoes and paws leaving faint imprints in the damp soil. The clouds above shifted lazily, letting occasional streams of sunlight cut through the canopy and warm their faces. For a while, they didn't speak, not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes silence felt like the most honest way to be together. It was Pikachu who broke the quiet, with a small, curious chirp. Ash glanced down, a smile tugging at his lips. "What is it, buddy?" Pikachu's ears flicked, and his gaze drifted upward, following the movement of the clouds. Ash tilted his head, then chuckled softly. "They kinda look like Pokémon, don't they?" One cloud stretched long like a serpentine dragonair. Another puffed into the vague shape of a Snorlax. Pikachu's cheeks sparked lightly, as if in playful agreement. They sat down on the side of the trail, Ash leaning back on his elbows and Pikachu curling up beside him. "You know," Ash began slowly, "I used to think everything about being a Pokémon trainer was about winning battles, catching new Pokémon, and getting stronger." He glanced at Pikachu, his eyes warm. "But you've shown me there's so much more to it than that." Pikachu's eyes softened, his tail swaying gently. They stayed there for a while, just looking at the sky, until Ash spoke again more quietly this time. "Do you remember when I almost lost you back in Viridian Forest?" His voice wavered ever so slightly. "I faced tough opponents and dangerous places, but nothing scared me more than that moment. I thought..." He swallowed, shaking his head before finishing. "I thought I'd never get to hear your voice again." Pikachu's ears drooped, his gaze falling to the ground. Without a word, he climbed into Ash's lap, resting his tiny paws on his chest. Ash instinctively wrapped his arms around him, holding him close. The steady thump of Ash's heartbeat calmed them both, as if reassuring each other that they were still here, still together. As the afternoon sun shifted, they found themselves at a familiar clearing, one where they'd camped months ago. The remains of a fire pit lay there, scattered stones still in a rough circle. Ash remembered that night well. It had been cold, the kind that cut through layers of clothing, and Pikachu had curled up inside his jacket to keep warm. He smiled faintly at the memory, the kind of smile that was more about feeling than expression. That night had been one of those times when nothing happened on the outside. No battles, no close calls, but everything happened on the inside. Ash had realized then that he didn't just own Pikachu as a partner. They belonged to each other in a way that couldn't be put into words. It wasn't about commands or victories. It was about trust and love, the kind that didn't fade when the Pokeballs were put away. Pikachu hopped down from Ash's arms, padding over to sniff the old fire pit. His nose twitched, and he turned back with a questioning look, as if asking, "Do you remember?" Ash nodded with a grin. "Of course I do. You kept me warmer than that fire ever did." The rest of the day stretched into evening. They set up camp again, almost in the same spot, and as the fire crackled to life, the orange glow danced in Pikachu's eyes. Ash found himself speaking again, not to fill the silence, but because the moment felt right. "Pikachu, you've been with me through everything. You've seen me at my best, and at my worst." His gaze fell to the flames, their light flickering across his face. "And you never walked away. Not once." Pikachu shuffled closer, pressing against Ash's side. The fire popped softly, sending tiny sparks into the cool night air. For a while, Ash just let the quiet carry them. He didn't need to say everything he felt Pikachu already knew. Some bonds were like that. Words were optional. Later, as they lay under the open sky, stars scattered in the darkness above, Ash turned on his side to face Pikachu. "You know," he murmured, "I used to dream about being the best Pokémon trainer in the world. And maybe I still do. But even if that never happens, I think I'm already the luckiest trainer alive." Pikachu blinked slowly, his cheeks glowing faintly, then curled up against Ash's chest. The night grew colder, but neither of them noticed. They had each other, and for both of them, that was enough. Ash sat on a grassy hillside, the evening sun painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The journey had been long, full of victories, defeats, laughter, and moments that had tested them to their very core. Beside him, Pikachu lay on its stomach, cheeks dimly sparking in the fading light, eyes half closed in calm contentment. It had been years since the day they first met, a day full of mistrust, shocks, literally, and misunderstandings. Now, there wasn't a second Ash could remember where Pikachu hadn't been by his side. They had grown together, fought together, healed together. Through storms, snow, blazing deserts, and the deepest forests, they had walked step for step. "Hey, Pikachu," Ash said quietly, leaning back on his elbows. "Remember our first gym battle?" Pikachu tilted its head, sparks dancing faintly at the memory. "You were so stubborn," Ash chuckled. "And honestly, I was worse. I didn't listen. I thought winning was everything." Pikachu's eyes softened. It wasn't just that gym battles had made them strong, it was what came after. Every failure had forced them to learn. Every win had pushed them to aim higher. But the battles, they weren't the whole story. It was the quiet moments in between that had stitched them together into something unbreakable. Ash could still picture the night they got caught in a heavy rainstorm. No shelter for miles, both soaked and shivering, but Pikachu had crawled into his jacket, pressing close for warmth. That night, Ash didn't feel like a trainer protecting his Pokémon. He felt like a friend holding on to another friend, making sure neither of them gave up. And then there was the day Pikachu got hurt during a fierce fight with a wild Fearow. Ash had rushed them to the Pokémon Center, his voice cracking as he pleaded with Nurse Joy to help. He'd paced the waiting room for hours, every tick of the clock echoing louder than the last. When Pikachu finally opened its eyes, weak but smiling, Ash had promised himself he would never take this partnership for granted again. Pikachu murmured softly now, its voice low and thoughtful. Ash smiled. Yeah, I know. We've been through a lot, huh? The wind brushed over the grass, carrying the distant sound of waves from a nearby river. Ash thought about all the people who had come and gone on this journey. Friends like Misty and Brock, rivals like Gary, even strangers they'd helped along the way. But through all of it, Pikachu had been the one constant, the one who stayed, no matter what. Ash lay flat on the grass, staring up at the clouds shifting lazily overhead. You know, I think people sometimes get it wrong, he said slowly. They think being a great trainer is about having the strongest Pokémon. But I think it's about understanding each other, trusting each other. It's about looking at your partner and absolutely knowing that they'd stand with you, even if the whole world was against you. Pikachu climbed onto his chest, its tiny paws resting over his heart. Pika! Ash reached up, gently scratching behind its ear. And that's what we've got. Something no battle can measure. The truth was, there had been moments Ash could have lost Pikachu, moments where the bond could have broken. But every trial, every risk they'd taken, had only welded it tighter. From the time Ash refused to trade Pikachu for a stronger Pokémon, to the day Pikachu chose to leave a perfect life in the forest, with other Pikachu just to keep traveling with him. These weren't just choices, they were declarations. You're my best friend, Pikachu, Ash said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of every year they'd spent together. No matter where we go or what happens, you always will be. Pikachu's ears twitched, and it leaned forward, pressing its cheek gently against Ash's. Sparks danced faintly between them, harmless, almost like a heartbeat. Neither needed to say more. In the distance, the sky shifted into deep shades of violet, and the first stars began to emerge. Ash and Pikachu sat together in the cool night air, the silence not empty, but full of every unspoken word, every shared glance, every battle cry, every laugh that had carried them here. They had faced countless trainers, legendary Pokémon, and dangers beyond what either could have imagined. But the real journey, Ash thought, wasn't marked by the badges in his case or the trophies he'd earned. It was marked by this bond invisible to everyone else, but stronger than steel, deeper than any ocean. Ash looked at Pikachu, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Ready for whatever comes next? Pika. Pikachu's reply was instant, sharp, and certain. And just like that, they stood. The road ahead was endless, but they didn't need to know where it would lead. All they needed to know was that they'd be walking it together. always. Ash and Pikachu's days became a rhythm only they understood. Early morning training under the soft hues of sunrise, afternoons filled with adventure, and evenings where they'd sit by the fire, sharing quiet moments without a single word spoken. It wasn't just about winning anymore. Every moment together was a silent vow that they would always stand by each other no matter what. One evening, as they were setting up camp near a quiet lake, Ash noticed Pikachu staring at the water's reflection. Pikachu's ears twitched slightly, as though deep in thought. Ash walked over and crouched beside him. "What's on your mind, buddy?" Pikachu looked up at him, eyes shimmering in the fading light, and then leaned against Ash's arm. The boy smiled, stroking Pikachu's fur. That small gesture said more than any words could. It was Pikachu's way of saying, "I'm here because of you." The bond between them was tested yet again when they came across an injured Pidgeot. Without hesitation, Pikachu rushed forward to protect it from a group of aggressive Spearow. Ash ran after him, shouting, "Pikachu, wait!" But Pikachu didn't back down, standing firm in front of the frightened bird Pokémon. Ash realized then, Pikachu wasn't just his partner, he was a protector, a friend who couldn't bear to see others hurt. After driving the Spearow away together, they nursed Pidgeot back to health over the next 2 days. Ash would gather berries while Pikachu kept watch, ensuring their new friend was safe. When the Pidgeot finally flew off, Pikachu waved happily, and Ash couldn't help but laugh. "You really care about everyone, huh?" Pikachu responded with a cheerful "Pika!" and bounded onto Ash's shoulder, as if to say, "And you taught me that." Their bond was not just about trust in battles, but about understanding each other's hearts. That understanding showed during one of their toughest moments yet. A sudden thunderstorm while they were traversing a narrow mountain path. The wind howled, rain poured relentlessly, and lightning cracked across the sky. Pikachu, despite being an electric type, wasn't afraid of the storm, but he could sense Ash struggling. The boy's steps slowed, his clothes soaked, and his breath came in uneven gusts from the cold. Without warning, Pikachu hopped down from Ash's shoulder and began walking ahead, deliberately slowing his pace to match Ash's weakened steps. He glanced back every few seconds, ensuring Ash didn't fall behind. Ash saw this and felt an unshakable warmth in his chest, despite the freezing rain. "Thanks, buddy," he murmured. Pikachu didn't respond with words. He just kept walking forward, leading Ash through the storm. By the time they reached a small cave for shelter, Ash was shivering. Pikachu pressed himself against Ash's side, sharing his warmth. They stayed like that until the storm passed, their breaths steadying together. In that quiet moment, Ash realized that their bond wasn't just about loyalty, it was about shared endurance. No matter the obstacle, they would push through it together. A few weeks later, they arrived in a bustling city where a Pokémon festival was being held. There were games, contests, and friendly competitions everywhere. Ash signed them up for a doubles match with a local trainer and her Charmander. Pikachu and Charmander, though different in nature, quickly learned to work together. They won the match with perfect teamwork, and the crowd cheered wildly. But the real highlight for Ash wasn't the win. It was when Pikachu ran straight into his arms afterwards, nuzzling his cheek in pure joy. Ash laughed, holding him close, feeling the same happiness radiating from his partner. That night, they stayed at a Pokémon Center. While Pikachu dozed on the bed, Ash sat by the window, looking out at the festival lights in the distance. "We've been through so much, Pikachu," he whispered. "And I know there's so much more ahead, but I can't imagine doing any of it without you." Pikachu stirred, eyes still half closed, and simply reached out a paw toward Ash. Ash gently took it, a silent promise passing between them. Their journey carried them across deserts, forests, and snowy peaks. In each place, their bond grew deeper. When Ash was unsure, Pikachu would nudge him forward. When Pikachu was tired, Ash would carry him without a second thought. It wasn't about who was leading or following anymore. They were walking side by side, always. One morning, as they set off toward their next challenge, Ash glanced down at Pikachu trotting beside him. "You know, Pikachu," he said with a grin, "I think we've become more than just trainer and Pokémon." Pikachu tilted his head, curious. "We're family." Pikachu's cheeks sparked softly, and he let out a happy Pika before jumping into Ash's arms. And in that moment, under the warm glow of the rising sun, it was clear. Their unbreakable bond was something that went far beyond battles, victories, or even their shared journey. It was a connection that would last a lifetime. Ash and Pikachu's journey had carried them through countless towns, forests, mountains, and seas. But no matter where they went, the one thing that never changed was the feeling of home they found in each other. They didn't need four walls or a roof to feel safe. Home was in the way. Pikachu curled up by Ash's side at night, in the way Ash's voice softened when he spoke to his partner, in the way their eyes lit up when they spotted each other in a crowded place. One chilly morning, they found themselves on a high cliffside overlooking the ocean. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, streaking the sky with gold and pink. Ash sat cross-legged. Pikachu perched comfortably on his shoulder, and for a while, they just watched the waves crash against the rocks below. Neither spoke. There wasn't any need to. It was one of those rare quiet moments where words would only get in the way. But Pikachu's gentle nudge against Ash's cheek broke the stillness. Ash laughed softly. "What is it, buddy? You're hungry already?" Pikachu shook his head with a small Pika, eyes sparkling. Ash didn't need to be told. He understood. Pikachu just wanted to make sure he was okay. That was something Ash had noticed more and more over the years. Pikachu didn't just follow him into battle. He followed him through emotions, through moods, through unspoken fears. Their bond wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding, without explanation. Like the time Ash had lost an important battle and sat under a tree for hours, saying nothing. Pikachu hadn't tried to cheer him up right away. Instead, he simply sat beside him, silent, sharing the weight of the disappointment, until Ash was ready to speak. That to Ash meant more than any words of encouragement could have. And Ash, in turn, had been there for Pikachu, in ways others might not notice. He could always tell when Pikachu was feeling tired, even if the electric mouse tried to hide it. There were days Pikachu would slow down just a little, his tail drooping, and Ash would pretend they just happened to stumble upon a spot perfect for a nap. That day by the ocean, Ash reached up and gently scratched Pikachu under the chin, a place he knew Pikachu loved. "You know," Ash said quietly, "I think we've seen just about everything together." Pikachu tilted his head, as if to say, "Not yet." Ash chuckled. "Yeah, you're right. There's still more out there. More places to go, more Pokémon to meet, more battles to fight. But no matter where we go or what happens, I don't ever want that to change. You and me, buddy. Pikachu? The answer was instant, filled with warmth and certainty. As they made their way down from the cliff, Ash thought about all the times he'd been pushed forward because Pikachu believed in him. Even in moments when he doubted himself, Pikachu's trust was unshakable. It was as if Pikachu could see the person Ash was becoming before Ash himself could. That faith worked both ways. Pikachu had faced dangers most Pokémon wouldn't dare approach. Legendary battles, life-threatening storms, even situations where giving up might have been easier. But Ash had never once doubted that Pikachu would give everything he had. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Later that evening, as they camped in a small clearing, Ash leaned against his backpack, looking up at the stars. Pikachu was curled up against his chest, tail twitching slightly as he dreamed. Ash smiled faintly. "You know, Pikachu," he whispered, "I think you've taught me more than any gym leader or professor ever could." He thought about it, how Pikachu had shown him patience when things didn't go as planned. How he'd taught him to fight with heart instead of just power. How he'd proven that real strength came from trust. Those lessons weren't written in any Pokédex, but Ash carried them with him, deep down, knowing they'd shape every choice he made in the future. The fire crackled softly, and for a moment, Ash wished the world could just freeze in this instant. Him, Pikachu, the stars, and the quiet assurance that they'd face tomorrow together. Pikachu stirred, eyes half opening, and gave a sleepy, "Pika." Ash chuckled. "Don't worry, buddy. Go back to sleep. I'll keep watch." And he meant it, not just for that night, but for every day that lay ahead. Because their bond wasn't just unbreakable, it was eternal. It wasn't bound by battles or victories, or even by the years that passed. It was something that would live on in every step they took, every challenge they faced, every shared glance that said, "I've got you." And Ash knew, with the kind of certainty that didn't need proof, that as long as Pikachu was by his side, there was nothing in the world, no storm, no loss, no distance, that could pull them apart. Ash stood at the edge of a grassy hill, the golden light of sunset spilling across the land in long, gentle beams. Pikachu was perched on his shoulder, its tiny paws resting against Ash's cheek, the familiar warmth grounding them both in that moment. They had been through so much: victories, losses, danger, laughter, moments of doubt. But somehow they were still here, still together, stronger than ever. The hill overlooked the winding path they had travelled just hours earlier, where the sound of rushing water from a nearby river mixed with the distant calls of wild Pokémon. The day had been long, filled with an unexpected battle against a wild pharaoh that had ambushed them. But now it felt peaceful, like the world was giving them a moment to breathe. "Pikachu?" Ash said softly, not turning his head. "You know, I used to think being a Pokémon trainer was all about winning battles, about proving myself." He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head at the memory of his younger self, so eager to rush into everything. "But you showed me that it's so much more than that. You taught me what it means to trust, to care, to never give up, not just for myself, but for someone else." Pikachu's ears twitched, and it gave a small affectionate Pika, before nuzzling Ash's cheek. That single gesture carried so much meaning, more than words could ever hold. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of pine from the nearby forest. Ash could feel the weight of everything they had endured, not as a burden, but as a story carved into who they were. The nights spent in the rain, shivering but keeping each other warm, the countless meals they had shared, even splitting the smallest scraps just to make sure neither went hungry. The way Pikachu had stood in front of him during battles, protecting him even when it was hurt. "You've saved me more times than I can count," Ash continued, his voice softer now. "Not just from danger, but from giving up on myself." His hands clenched slightly. The memories of failures, of those moments he thought he wasn't good enough, rising to the surface. "Whenever I thought I couldn't keep going, you looked at me like you knew I could. And somehow, I believed it too." Pikachu gave a determined "Pika Pie" and hopped down from Ash's shoulder, landing lightly on the grass. It looked up at him, eyes shining in the fading sunlight, and gave a little grin. Ash knew what that meant. It was Pikachu's way of saying, "We've still got more to do. Our journey isn't over." Ash crouched down, resting his arms on his knees so he could be face to face with Pikachu. "You're right, we're not done yet. There are still more places to see, more friends to make, more Pokémon to meet." His grin widened. "And no matter what happens, we face it together. Always." Pikachu's tail swished, and it let out a bright, confident cry. "Pika!" They stayed there for a moment, the world around them fading into the background. It was just them, the boy who had once been a clumsy rookie, and the Pokémon who had once refused to even battle for him. Now, they were something far greater than trainer and Pokémon. They were family. As they began walking back toward camp, the sky shifted from gold to a deep purple, stars beginning to sparkle above. Ash glanced at Pikachu trotting by his side, and he thought about all the trainers and Pokémon they had met along the way. Many of them had come and gone, each leaving behind a piece of their story. But Pikachu had stayed through it all. And that was the thing about bonds like theirs. They weren't built in a day. They were forged in fire, in rain, in laughter, and in pain. Every moment, every choice, every shared glance had woven them tighter together until nothing could tear them apart. As they reached the small campfire Brock had set up, the warmth of the flames welcomed them. Misty looked up from her spot, a teasing smile on her face. "Took you too long enough? Did you stop to have a heart-to-heart?" Ash chuckled, exchanging a quick look with Pikachu. "Something like that," he said, settling down by the fire. Pikachu hopped into his lap without hesitation, curling up as if this was exactly where it belonged. And as the night settled in, Ash realized something. No matter where their path led them, whether to victory or defeat, to new beginnings or bittersweet goodbyes, there was one thing he would always know with absolute certainty. He and Pikachu would walk it together. Forever.